So we're going over our business plan. Take a look up top. You're going to see a couple things. In our agent business plan, we break it down into 12 different sections, just one to one to one to one to one, jumping you through exactly what you need to build the perfect business plan going into 2020. So let's start at the top. In order to cover the reported expenses from your budget, so if this is just your business expenses or a mix of business and personal, this is the minimum amount taken from that bottom grand total. So this agent so far has $33,310 that they have to pay for, right? That's going to decide how many people we need to talk to, how many people we need to sign, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you scroll down to the middle of this business plan, you'll see that if you're only operating on the minimum standards to survive, we need to close 18 transactions this year. That's it, only 18 to pay for all of the rest of our stuff at our typical commission rate, at our typical price point, et cetera, et cetera. But let's add in some extra details so we can get a true picture of whatever it is. So let's say our business expenses are $33,000 a year, but you want to make $100,000 this year, right? What do? You type it in right here. So we're going to go through $100,000. You push enter. Let's go down to number 3. We're going to find our average sales price because all of this is based on what your net income is after you've had brokerages remove their fees and also the average sales price factoring in, as well as the basic commission rate. So what are those 3 things? So let's do our sales price first. You should know your basic sales price in your area. Let's say for this, it's $150,000 per house, right, in our area. Now, the average commission can be anything. I say use last year's data and just factor in whatever you're seeing. So if out of the 20 houses that you sold last year, what was the average commission rate that you had? Was it a 2.5? Was it a 3? Was it a 2? Was it a 4? Whatever. Let's type that in right now. 3%. And what's your broker split? How much does your broker give you for every transaction, let alone the fees they take on top? So let's say our commission split typically is 80%. 80% going to you, the agent, 20% going to your broker. We can add that in right now, push enter, boom, here you go. To achieve your goal figure, you must close 28 houses this upcoming year, all right? So what does that mean? How many people do you need to meet with to close that number of transactions per year? Let's keep going. On number 8, we're looking at the percentage of contracts that you close regularly. So look at last year's data. How many contracts did you sign and how many contracts actually closed? If you have enough real estate experience where you can break that down as an average or a pattern, then you'd enter that in here now. Typically, we say for any new agent, let's just go with a usual statistic. We're going to say that 75% of all of the contracts you sign are actually going to close this year, all right? So if we're looking at 75% of those contracts, what has to happen is we're closing, to account for any potential fall throughs, we actually need to sign 37 different contracts. Because remember, 25% of them are probably going to go bye-bye. So if we're signing 37, that'll allow us to hit our end game goal of 28 sales contracts by the end of the year. Now, to go a little further in depth, we suggest breaking down your percentages in listings and buyers. If you are like all of the other pros out there, you know that getting a listing first is going to be the best way to get more buyers, more leads, more listings later down the line. So we think you should have 70% of your inventory and your contracts. So we think you should have 70% of your contracts listing contracts, meaning you are representing the seller of a listing, and 30% of those for buyers, whether it's vicariously through listing generation or maybe open houses or lead generation stuff for yourself, or maybe you're paying for Zillow or whatever. 30% of that should be coming from buyers. If it's flip-flopped, we need to be working to get way more sellers into your pipeline than you do buyers. Remember, working a business plan off of buyers is purely reactionary. Prospecting and planning and finding sellers who are willing to sell the product you need to get sold, that is a way to build better business. You can only do that by talking to people and letting them know what you offer as opposed to every other person on earth. And you do that through social media, you do that through mailings, you do that through just regular human contact with people. It's not that hard. I digress. Number 11. This is what we're thinking about when we think of the number of appointments necessary to get one of those things signed. So what we think of is, for true professionals, they usually have qualified any prospective buyers or sellers so well that when they meet with them, they typically know exactly what they need to say to get either a buyer agency or a listing contract signed. That doesn't mean that a buyer is going to buy that specific house, but at least that agent can guarantee that they're working with that buyer and they're going to get a commission from that buyer. And obviously the same thing goes with a listing, right? So let's take a look at number 11, and we need to find a ratio of how many contacts and appointments it takes. And we need to find a ratio of how many appointments it takes to actually get one of those buyer agency contracts or listing contracts signed. For new agents, we typically say that it takes about 4. So you need 4 appointments with someone to build enough trust to get someone signed. If you're thinking in terms of a listing, you're probably not going to get the listing if it's going to take you 4 times to convince them to have you sell their house. But a buyer might take you to 4 different properties to actually sign on with you inevitably. Of course, there's other factors you need to put into that, but this ratio will give you a better understanding of how much you need to really put forth effort into getting those appointments made, all right? So let's just go right down the road here. Let's change it maybe to 3. So say we're newer, but we're not brand new. So it takes typically 3 appointments with someone to get one of those contracts signed. Now, after factoring for all of those potential fall throughs and anything else, the goal, we need to have 111 appointments within 1 year, right? 111 appointments. Whew. That's crazy. So what does that mean, 111 appointments? Let's go to our prospecting guide and let's see exactly what that equates to in terms of professional prospective contact.